the war between Jesus and Satan. And I don't know if you can see it when you come around here to look, but there's this little closet area right here. That used to be an office for her, and that's where she wrote that book. So Mrs. White was told by God that she was to write and preach and spread the word, and she was not to spend her time doing housework. So she was told to hire somebody to help her. So she hired a cook, and the cook would make their breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they also hired a cleaning lady that would do her laundry. Now, they had a garden. Mrs. White loved gardening, and so when they would do their preserving, they would put their preserved food over here in what was known as the buttery. And when they built the house, how many of you have running water in your house? You can just go to the faucet, you can just turn the water on. Well, they didn't have that back then. They had to go outside to a pump or a well with a bucket, and they had to bring the water in. So when they built this house, there was no well. But Mrs. White's neighbor had a well, and he would share the water with all of his neighbors. Now, the other way that they would collect water was when it rained. And they would make it so that the roof would catch the rain, and then it would come down, and it would be put into this right here. And I don't know how to turn the light on, but there's a light down there. I've never figured the light thing out. Anyway, it's a deep pit where they would collect the water. Now, they wouldn't drink that water because that would give them a bad case of diarrhea. But they would use the water to wash their floors, wash their clothes, take their bath. They would use it all for that. And they would bring it up into this hand pump, and they would pump it into a bowl up here in what is called a dry sink there. So this is the kitchen part. You can look over here. You can see where the dining room is. We're going to go into this little room right here next.
Very convenient.
In this room, this was an attic. So this is a room that they had their mother-in-law and father-in-law live in. It was over on this side. It was called the in-law apartment. And this is where they have a collection of some first edition books of Mrs. White's, as well as some publications of the Signs of the Times. And if you look on this wall over here, you can see pictures of James and Ellen White and 3 of their boys, Henry, Edson, and Willie. Now, they ended up having a 4th baby while they were here, and his name is John Herbert. And John Herbert ended up passing away when he was 3 months old. You can see his original headstone down here. Yeah, it was in this house. This is the only house that the Whites ever lived in that they had all 4 of their children. Because when they first started the work, remember when Henry was just a baby, the Olsons took care of him for like 6 years while they traveled the world and shared the message.
When 6 years? Someone else was watching the child?
Yeah, and it ripped Mrs. White's heart out. She hated that.
6 years. Not me back.
So then Edson was born, and when Edson was born, he was also given to another family to be watched for a much shorter period of time. And then once Willie was born, he always stayed with his mom and dad. But Henry, when they were living here, Henry was 16 years old. He was known as Mrs. White's sweet singer. He would get up and sing in the morning. The Whites were very, very musical. Deacon John, the father, the grandfather, he taught voice lessons. So anyway, Henry ended up getting sick when they went on a trip to Maine, and he ended up getting pneumonia and he passed away in Maine. So Mrs. White lost the baby first and then lost Henry. And so what started out as a happy, happy place because they were here with all of their children, it turned into a very, very sad, sad place for her. So come on over here. Go ahead and have a seat. See if they've left yet. Oh, they're still there.
Where's the place that you had a picture?
Now, remember I told you that
Standing.
there was a cook that they hired?
Yes.
And there was also a washerwoman. Let's wait until they come in so everybody can hear it. Come have a seat. There you go. There you go. There's two seats.
Two. One. Here.
So anyway, they had a washerwoman. Now the washerwoman was doing what she was supposed to do. She washed clothes, right? Willie was about 2 years old. Now I don't know if you all have noticed, but the largest part of the body on a little bitty kid is his head, right? Their heads are always big. So the washerwoman was washing the clothes and she wrung them out. And she took them outside and hung them up on their dryer, which is called a clothesline. And anyway, Willie came around and toddled. Willie ended up coming around and he was like, oh, there's a bucket. What's in the bucket? What's in the bucket of a person who's doing clothes?
No.
Water, right? There was
Like laundry?
water. And so he went over and he looked down and probably saw his face and he's like, oh! And he fell right in.
Wow.
His head went right in and his little feet stuck right up. And the washer lady didn't know what had happened. And so she came back around and she sees these two little feet sticking out of the bucket. And she screamed for Mrs. White. Mrs. White came running and they pulled him out of the water. And she started taking his clothes off and she was rolling him in the grass, back and forth, back and forth. And she's asking the cleaning woman, was it hot water or cold water? And the lady said it was cold water. So she keeps running. She says, go get James. And James was at the printing house, and that was down a mile or so down the road. So someone ran and got James, and she's just rolling him and praying and rolling him and praying. And when James came running up, he said, is he alive? Is he alive? And at that point, no, he wasn't alive yet. And so they prayed one more time and rolled him one more time, and then his little eyelids flickered. And they realized he was going to live. Now, Willie ended up being the son that stayed with Mrs. White all the time. After his father died, after her husband, James White, died, he ended up being the one that went to Australia and to Europe and started to work with him there. So God blessed him, God saved him. The devil knew that something was gonna happen with him in the future, you know, that he would be a part of the work, and he was trying to get rid of him. So anyway, so that was that. Let me see if how close to being, oh, looks like I'm right in there. Are you guys almost done up there?